level discussion system, and I'll call it a discussion system as opposed to a conference system because that's really what it is. There is no meeting management available. It is purely for discussion. What makes DDS 5900 series valuable is that it does have excellent sound quality. It is very easy and quick to set up. There's few components, so there isn't a whole lot of options that you need to worry about, and it does allow for translation. So what are the core components? The central unit, the DIS-CCU, the 5900 series, is the brain of the unit. It's the main power source for the discussion units. They're all connected in a daisy chain via the DCS LAN, which is a proprietary bus for power, audio, and data. And we're going to talk about the LAN more and more as we go through today. It's an auto mixer of all the incoming signals. It's a control unit for all the microphones and all other audio-related aspects. It's your interface to tie in external systems like room control and external PA recording devices, that kind of stuff. There is a max of around 60 delegate units powered off the CCU, and then a max of 250 delegate units when you are adding additional power. And you can do up to 2 channels of interpretation on this unit. Before we get any further into interpretation, how many of you deal with interpretation at all? A little bit? Okay, so I'll make sure to talk about that. For me as a Canadian, we have to, by law. Everything we do is in French and English. So I've found Europe and Canada, the interpretation is much more important than in the US. It's kind of a fluke that you run into it here. But it is becoming more and more prevalent. So it does have 8 outputs on that CCU as well as 2 inputs, all analog, so 3-pin XLRs. Kind of baked into the CCU is the 5900 series GUI. That allows you to assign seat numbers and names to all of the units in the system. Gives you all of your operating modes, allows you to turn microphones on and off. Gives you your speaker and request lists. The main unit, the delegate unit, is the 5980p. This has just a touch and a speak and request button, a configurable button that has your LED attached to it as well, that you can change depending on what the units are set as, whether they're delegates or chairman or dual delegate. It does have your channel selection. It's got your microphone socket as well, and then your loudspeakers built in. One of the changes we're going to talk about later with MXC, the new product, is 5900 series doesn't have an in or an out. It is just 2 connections to make your daisy chain, and it doesn't matter which direction you connect those in. As you want to delineate which unit you're using, you're going to purchase different packages. It's a button overlay that changes the unit from a delegate to a chairman or an interpreter. Then you've got your option for speak and mute or just speak. And depending on which overlay is applied to that unit, that's what it becomes. The flush mount unit operates in much the same way, but instead of being a portable unit that sits on top of the desk, it would be installed into a table or a desk. And this comes in 2 models. One is for speech, and one is for speech with an interpretation channel selection as well. And again, the overlays are applied on these units to change their function. There are a multitude of gooseneck microphones available, including the new shotgun mic. If you notice the short mics on any of the units in here, that is the brand new shotgun mic, which I love because I don't like having to lean forward into a mic. I can be lazy and kind of stay back, and it'll still pick me up. In the next hour, you're going to get tired again. I mentioned of talking about DCS LAN. In the past, we have said that using our cables was a recommendation. Shure is now saying it is a requirement. If you have to pull structured cable, Shure is requesting that you would terminate your cable runs female to female, and then use our jumper cables to go from that female connection into our units. The reason for this is 95% of the failures that we find in the field are due to cabling issues and not the product itself. You got to remember that this stuff does run on that proprietary DCS LAN bus. It's not a standard Ethernet, and there is a lot of power going down these lines. If you're running 250 delegate units on this with a power inserter, you could be putting 250 to 400 watts down that line. So if you're not using good cable that meets the specification, you're going to have issues with the product. Our cables that we sell are available in 9 lengths from 2 feet to 150 feet. So we do have plenty of options available. as we go through today too, there is a lot of accessories available for the 5900 series as well as MXC. These are junction boxes, power inserters, signal repeaters, your LAN switcher, different audio output units to get the audio off the chain and into a different interface, and then redundant controller options as well. If anyone would like more information on this, I'd be happy to do that after the meeting, a little more offline. But we could spend hours going through all of these options. But what is important to note is that you can make a very simple system or a very complex system, depending on your requirements. And all of the signal repeaters, power inserters, switchers, output units, all of these things are available to make that happen for you. We also have a few headphone options. The one I like to point out is the stethoscope. It's becoming more important because various cultures don't have the ability to go over the head due to hairstyles or headdresses. So this gives you the option to go under. And then the mono ear clip is very important as well because it allows you to hear the floor as well as a translated language or just listening assistance. So this gives you the idea of a kind of a bigger 5900 series installation here where you're going to have a digital infrared repeater or infrared transmitter, and then you might have 100 audience members all with infrared receivers to listen to the program audio. And then here we've got one chairman and 4 delegates on one LAN line and then a couple of interpreters on another LAN line. Any questions on the 5900 series? Does everybody kind of wrap their heads around the application for that? Because our next step up is the new MXCW, which essentially would meet all the requirements of 5900 series, but does it wirelessly. So I'm going to give you the official pitch here. It is an integrated wireless audio system designed for the conference and meeting space. Quick and easy setup that delivers intelligible audio, improving meeting productivity. So that is the only thing I will read verbatim today. But what are the key features and benefits of MXCW? One, it's secure. It gives you AES encryption. It does have a browser login that can be password protected. It's a very simple setup. You turn it on and it works. All of the units are reconfigurable, so there's only a few SKUs you need to worry about. It has self-managed RF, automatic interference detection and avoidance, which we're going to go over in a little bit. Has extended runtime. You can run these units for 11 hours is the Shure specification that we publish. It's more like 12 or 13. As usual, Shure is very conservative. We don't like to brag too much. But I think when you throw your batteries in here in a minute, you're going to see times of 12 and a half to 13 hours. It's interoperable. It has analog and digital ins and outs. And it's a very simple system if you need it to be. You just have your access point, your delegate stations, your charger, and then your microphones. That's all you really need to worry about. This is the access point here. We've got one up at the front, and there is another one at the back you can take a look at. It can control up to 125 delegate stations from one access point. It operates in 5 gig or 2.4 gig spectrum, and that is handled automatically. It does have interference detection and avoidance. I mentioned it has AES 128 encryption. It's got your one analog in and out that you can take a look at on the unit. Those are just 3-pin XLRs. And then it does have 10 Dante channels in and out. So that gives you 11 total ins and outs, which if you need more than that, we have other options available as well. But if you've got more than 11 channels going in and out of your access point, you're having a good day. It's got your built-in LCD. So you can do most things from the front of this unit, but the baked-in GUI does give you the ability to do a lot more control. And then you've got your single network connection. It is just an RJ45 connection on the back. It's PoE, and that gives you all of your Dante control, audio control, and everything is over that one connection. The delegate unit is selectable to be either a chairman, delegate, listener, or ambient. Dual delegate is coming. An interpreter has already been launched, so we do have another option now as well. It's got your touchscreen display that'll give you all your configuration. If it's set up as a delegate, it would generally just show speaker lists. If it's set up as a chairman, it would allow you to start and stop a vote, and all that functionality is baked right into that unit. It's got your built-in loudspeaker for program audio. It's got an NFC card slot on the side to identify who's using that unit. It does have a micro USB on the back of the unit. If you have a marathon meeting that is in excess of 11 hours, you can plug in any standard micro USB charger and it'll keep this unit going for you. It's got a 3.5 millimeter TRRS input on the back for remote participant that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. And then it's got dual headphone outputs on either side with volume control for assisted listening or interpretation. The network charging station, we have a couple sitting at the back. It'll handle up to 10 batteries. It gives you all of your charge status LEDs. It is networked, so you can look at the health of all the batteries online once you're on the network using the Shure web device discovery. It does have storage mode, which is important for shipping. It'll discharge the batteries to around 30% to allow for safe transport, and then it also puts them in a healthy storage state. It's 1.5 hours to charge to 50% and 4 hours for a full charge. The battery itself is a 3-cell lithium ion. Keep in mind that it is included, the battery is included when you purchase a 640. We've already had issues of running out of batteries because people were ordering 40 unit systems and ordering 40 spare batteries. While I would recommend maybe 25% spares, generally you're not going to need to have a spare battery for every unit. It's just you're wasting your money and they're going to sit and do nothing. So it does have remote monitoring. There is a little LED status on it. You can push the battery and see what the life is like. Pretty much the same options for gooseneck microphones as the 5900 series, and you're going to get sick of seeing this slide as well. It is the same goosenecks in the wireless product as the wired, the newest addition being the shotgun mic. But standard issue is a 16 or 20-inch gooseneck microphone using the Microflex capsule that we've used in MXW. These can be changed. It ships with a cardioid, but you can change it to a super cardioid or an Omni, depending on your application. I mentioned they're available single flex or dual flex. Single flex would be flexible at the base. Dual flex is flexible at the base and at the LED end up here as well. It has a locking 10-pin connector, and it does use the Shure CommShield technology for complete RF immunity. So let's talk about applications. You've got a structured meeting where you're going to have a chairman sitting at the front of the room running the meeting. You're going to set some permissions and speak limits in the GUI to give some control to that meeting. And we're going to want to know who's speaking, so when people come into the meeting, they're going to stick their NFC card in the side of the unit, and that'll identify them to the room. If you're doing a flex space, this is really what the product was designed for, I think. A lot of our European friends talk about the tea lady. They wanted to design a system that the same woman who would come in at 3 o'clock with tea and crumpets is going to be able to come in and set up a meeting. So literally she would come in and plug in the PoE and deploy the MXC 640 units out on the table, and they just turn on and work. And that's really what we've developed here. It does have automatic interference and detection and avoidance, and I'll go over that in a couple of minutes, how that works. But then it also allows you to just take an analog output from the access point and go straight into the house system for sound reinforcement or voice lift. Very easy to use. For something like a historic venue where you can't run any cables, this is also a great solution because you don't have to run any cables at all. You can set it on a mic stand, set up your meeting, and you're done. If you want to do a permanent installation, you can just mount it in the ceiling with the included mounted bracket and set your meeting up, and away you go. This is a standard system, how we would set it up. You'll notice you've got your wireless conference units. Laptop is plugged into a PoE switch. The PoE switch is powering the access point. And then in this scenario, we've included a wireless handheld microphone into the system to give us the ability to maybe ask questions of people who don't have a unit in front of them. And then we're going to take the output to the house system to do some powered loudspeakers in the room to give it a little more of a voice lift or PA feel. I mentioned the TRRS. It's not active yet, but with the new firmware coming shortly, it'll allow, if Vanessa's late for the meeting, I'm going to call Vanessa on my cell phone and plug her into the back of one of these units. Now she occupies a mic channel, but that allows her to join the meeting and as well as listen to the meeting on her end. The only drawback to that is I'm going to require Vanessa to mute herself. I can't mute her station anymore. It would be open all the time. Another cool feature I like with this, if you look on the side of the unit, There is headphone outputs on either side. So if you had an overflow room or a press room where you want the program audio to be heard, you can just take one of these units and plug it into a pair of powered loudspeakers or a small PA system, and now you've got your overflow room covered without having to go to an outside system. The embedded web app does have 3 different views. There's an admin view, a chairman view, or a display only. Admin gives you control over everything, where a chairman gives you control of just the meeting aspect. So loudspeaker volume, speaker lists, that kind of thing. And then the display only view would display speaker lists, so whoever's speaking, who's requesting to speak, and then perhaps voting results. I mentioned before it has automatic frequency detection and avoidance. So the way that works, we're running this system on DFS channels, which is dynamic frequency selection, which really is either military or weather radar channels. The laws around us using those channels are that we have to listen to the channel that we're using at all times. If there's any interference at all, we have to get off that channel. So there's 2 Wi-Fi scanners in this unit that are constantly scanning the 5 gig environment, listening for an open channel. It listens to that channel for 60 seconds, lets us know that it's available, and then moves on to the next channel. While it's doing that, it's scanning the channel we're on to make sure there's no interference. If there is any, we move to a safe escape route. And that happens with no perceptible drop-off in audio. It just does it in the background, and you don't need to worry about it. This is what that GUI looks like. And if we have time, I can pull it up. But you can deselect channels. If you know in your building there's a 5 gig channel that you're using for evac or something like that, we can avoid that channel altogether. Or if you've got, say, a secretarial pool that's running a whole bunch of 2.4 gig headsets, we can just stay right away from those channels and it won't even ever look at them. So why don't we take a quick second. In front of you, you should have a unit. Just throw the battery in. I'll give you an idea of how long it takes to boot this system. I didn't mention, while you're doing that, I didn't mention the NFC card programmer. This programmer is available online, and we can give you the specification for it and the model number. They're about $35 on Amazon. To program the NFC cards, there's a small software application you're going to download from Shure that allows you to do 2 fields of identification. It's labeled as first name, last name. Generally, I've been using first name to do the name and last name to do either their position or what company they're with. And then when you put your NFC card into the side of the unit, it automatically identifies you to the room. While we're waiting for them to boot up, any questions? There's got to be. Nobody? You guys are being way too nice this morning. Or you're just not awake yet. Need to get you some more caffeine. As it's coming up, this is the map pricing for the units. So with a microphone, you're looking at about $1,500, $1,600 per seat. And then you add in the access point. So depending on the number of units, you're going to be around $1,700, $1,800 a seat. Is everybody up and passing audio now? So I've got my unit up here set as a chairman. Through here, we're kind of increasing the complexity of the systems that were available, that are possible. And now MXC would be the most complex. But I don't want it to scare you. This is what DIS looked like 2 years ago. You can see it looks like, my favorite is the interpreter station, the IS-6132P, installed in a Russian missile silo somewhere. It looks like it should be used to be activating the laser that is going to cut Bond in half. But this is what the range looks like now. Okay? So we've taken the same functionality, we've added to it, we've cleaned it up, and we've changed it from someone else's microphone capsules to Shure microphone capsules. So that is one of the biggest changes, that this product now does sound like a Shure product, and you get that Shure quality built into the units. So what are the key components of the MXC system? Again, we're back to that central control unit. The same CCU that we use in the 5900 series is also used for the MXC. It's expandable up to 3,800 participants. There's 4 interpretation channels included. It has 8 analog out and 2 analog in, as I mentioned before. This can power up to 50 MXC units on its own, again with additional power inserters and all of those other accessories I talked about earlier, the cable splitters and all the rest of it. You can add up to 3,800 units. But with this now, we've added the ability to have a redundant cabling option. So on one chain, you can daisy chain them all and then bring it back to the CU. And using something called an MXC ACC RB, that I call the McRib, it is a gender bender. So before you finish your loop, you put your McRib in the line, and that turns your goes indas to goes outas, and allows the signal flow to reverse. So if you do have a break in the line, your system won't come down, okay? One thing to note, that CCU on its own controls the 5900 series. In order for it to work with MXC, you have to purchase the feature license to unlock all of the capabilities in that unit to run a MXC. Once you've purchased that feature license, you can revert and switch back to 5900 series. You can use the same CCU for both systems if you have a rental application, but that is selectable. So that first slide can be a little daunting with the amount of products that are available in this product line, but there's really only 5 that I want you to focus on. There's 5 or 6. So the MXC 620 is the first unit there. This is going to give you chairman and delegate modes. It's going to have your NFC card capability built in, and it's going to have your dual interpretation, dual delegate option is available as well as interpretation, and then your Braille is included on that 620 unit. And that is the small, kind of simple looking unit that's out here. If you need to add voting, so I would look at that unit as the discussion unit. When you need to add voting, now you're going to move to the 630. That gives you the same capabilities of the 620, but adds 5-button voting, okay? Now, if you need to take one more step up to have the ability to control meetings at the unit itself, you're going to go to the 640. That gives you the LCD touchscreen and then gives you the ability to display agendas and control the meeting from that unit itself, as opposed to just being a listener or a voter. Those were all portable. They're going to sit on top of the desk or on top of the table. The 620-F is the flush mount, so it has the same capabilities as the 620 portable. It would just be routed into the desk and flush mounted. The 630, again, has the same capabilities as the 630 portable unit, but it's flush mounted. So again, you've got your discussion unit and then your discussion unit with voting. There is no 640 flush mount model. We just decided it just wasn't necessary. You're not going to have the LCD built into a unit as often as you're going to have a portable unit on top of the desk. So that's going to cover 90% of your applications. The other 10% is going to be a modular unit where you need the ability to have, say, a podium or a mic stand mounted with perhaps just a microphone input for audience participation, where someone's going to come and address the city council and they need to stand at a podium and address the mayor. You're going to do that with the MXC MIU unit, which the base unit there, the MXC MIU, would be mounted under a desk or in a podium, perhaps right on the side of a mic stand. And you're going to run an HDMI cable from that unit up to the either speaker or speaker and either microphone or microphone and speaker, depending on the application. Those are flush mount units as well, and they're set to be available as a chairman or a delegate mode. And then it does have standard fixed speak and mute buttons. The MXC MIU also has an XLR input, so you can use this box as a way to introduce audio into the system. Either, say, a handheld microphone, or if you wanted to plug in some kind of audio source to run program audio during breaks, you could have some background music running. This allows you to introduce that audio into the system, like onto the DCS LAN through this box. Right now, you can only do one or the other. So if you're using the microphone and speaker, you can't use that XLR input. There is talk that in the future we'll be able to use both, but for now it is one or the other. Also in this range is the interpretation unit. We had one gentleman here say that he has been involved in interpretation, so I'll spend a minute on this. This is the only product currently shipping from anyone that meets the ISO 20109 European Union interpreters specification. I know there's another one coming, but I think we're the only ones shipping right now. So I've come to learn that interpreters are an interesting group, very much divas, and I'm learning all this stuff. I didn't know that you had to fly first class if you're an interpreter, but apparently you do. So this has all of your relay and outgoing language channels are all displayed. You've got your 8 relay buttons. I didn't even know what a relay was when I started this. So if you're interested, if you have someone who speaks English and French, and then someone who speaks French and Spanish, and then someone who speaks Spanish and German, if you're at an international conference, the floor might be speaking in English, and then the English translator is going to French, and then someone's listening to the French translation to go to Spanish, and then they're listening to the Spanish translation to go to German. So that would be 2 relays. You can do up to 8 times. And apparently this happens constantly. It sounds to me like a bad game of telephone, and I'm not sure if I would expect what comes out after 8 relays to be exactly what was said on the floor, but this unit would allow you to do that. And so basically the way it works is we've got your 8 relays, so the interpreter has the option to choose what language they want to listen to, and then what language they're going to go out with. One of the weird things about this is the loudspeaker is on the back of the unit, and my initial reaction to that was, well, that makes no sense, but every interpreter booth on the planet has a glass screen, a glass wall at the back, so the audio would then hit that glass to reflect back to them. Most of the time they're going to be wearing their headsets anyways, but the loudspeaker is there as an option. And it does have, this is the newest kind of addition to the interpreter console, is the ability to store all of the interpreter's presets on an NFC card or USB card. And then when they insert that into the interpreter station, all of their presets are automatically loaded back onto the unit. All of the same gooseneck microphones are available for the MXC product as what's available for MXCW. They are completely interchangeable. You can take any of these mics at any of these units and switch them out. So I did mention before, it does have the bicolor LED. It is RF immune. It uses a 10-pin connector. We're not using all of the pins right now, but that does allow us to add some functionality in the future should we choose to do so. Also new in this range is the MXC sign that is in front of me here. It's a dual-sided name sign. They're powered via the DCS LAN. They only take power when they're being programmed. The rest of the time you can have them disconnected and they would remain with the sign, whatever you've put on there. It's like a Etch-a-Sketch, basically. It's an electronic Etch-a-Sketch. So you can't shake them to clear the sign off, but it's the same idea. They are available as a desk mount the way you're sitting here. I can take this trim piece off and then route it into the table, and it would be able to be flush mounted as well. We will see these in operation with our mock council meeting in a few minutes, so you'll get an idea of how they work. And And again, the functionality on this, they're programmable right now via the GUI that's baked into the CCU, or you can program them via some software that we're going to talk about in a minute. USB programming is coming soon, and I think that's important to note. There is a USB input on these signs, because I can see these being a valuable addition to the wireless system, where you would program them via a laptop and USB and deploy them with your wireless units. So keep that in mind. When they developed the USB programming, they had it working and then realized that it was an unsecured way onto the network if you just plugged in via USB. So they have to work on the security now to make sure that no one is getting into that USB port and onto our audio network. So they'll have it fixed shortly. Again, cables. We are requiring the use of Shure cables on these products. I mentioned that earlier, and the problem you're going to have is if you get your own cables made, even if they meet our specifications, if there's an issue with the installation, when you call into Shure for help, Shure is going to say, what cables are you using? And you're going to say, we built them. And Shure support is going to say, will you place an order for our cables and swap out the cables and call us back? Right? Because again, 90 to 95% of failures on these products is because of the cabling structure. Feature licenses. So the standard DIS CCU, which with the addition of the feature license 6000, allows you to operate up to 250 MXC units. Okay, you cannot use the CCU without that feature license on MXC. If you need to control more than 250 units, you're going to purchase feature license 6000, and then you're going to purchase feature license 6000-3800. That allows you to control up to 3,800 participant units. That's actually a bit of a misinformation there. It says 250 units. It's 250 delegates. So if you were using 120 dual delegates, that would be 240 participants. Okay. So with the single license, you can do up to 250 participants. For interpretation, it is baked in with 4. If you need more than that, you can purchase 8, 16, or 31 channels of interpretation. Speaking with a gentleman in California a couple of weeks ago that does the LDS Church international meetings, where they do 91 languages in a meeting. So, yeah, good luck with that. I can't imagine what that control room looks like with 91 interpreters spread around the room, and they only work 40 minutes at a time before they require a 40-minute break. That's another good thing about interpreters. So, yes, very good union. This is the user interface that's baked in. So for standard meetings where you don't need a recorded vote, like you're just going to have an ad hoc vote, a quick, should we do this as a company? Everyone votes, okay, let's move on. If you need recorded voting or any kind of more advanced speech timers, agenda control, that kind of thing, we're going to move into Software 6000. Is anyone here familiar with Software 6000? Okay, so I don't need to dredge up the past too much. I will tell you that Software 6000 was developed by DIS over the last 20 years, and it at times operates like a 20-year-old software. It has been continued to be updated, but it's like adding additions to a cottage. You just keep adding more doorways. And on the left here, you'll see that's where we were last year. There was 28 SKUs. Depending on what you needed, you had to order each component of the software separately. So you would order what you thought was Software 6000, and it was just the kind of basic license and didn't allow you to do anything. You needed to order your display application. You needed to order your user application. We decided to clean that up and take those 28 SKUs and condense them down to 8. So you end up with Software 6000 Basic Suite now, which is a combination of around 12 of the old SKUs built into one product. This is going to give you 95% of what you're ever going to need, okay? So it gives you one conference admin application, so that's kind of your administrator app built onto the unit. It's going to give you a user application, and then it's going to, all the things on the right are baked in. Your meeting creation, multiple meeting modes, agenda creation, all this stuff is included in that basic package. If you need a more complex system, you're going to add the CAA, which is the Conference Admin App. You can do up to 15 additional licenses for that. You can do up to 199 user applications. Now you're asking, why would you need that many? This might be in a server room somewhere on the network, and you may have 30 different clerks who are creating their meetings via their computer, right? So you'd need those 30 licenses to be able to get onto this unit to create your meetings. And then your display app, you can do up to 16 display licenses. So that would be to display agendas from various computers throughout a facility to have the agenda and meeting control and everything displayed. Now, if you need to have a recorded vote, you need to add Software 6000 Vote. And this will allow you to view everything in relation to the vote: who voted when, how long it took them to vote, how long the vote was, whether or not they changed their vote. All of these options are baked in. The ADV-50 gives you advanced meeting control for up to 50 participants. If you need more than 50 participants, you would have to add the additional license as well. And then the ESI module allows for API control and your streaming directly out of the unit. This gives you an idea of a system at a glance. The one thing I like to point out on here is that you'll notice there is DCS LAN and Ethernet. These are completely different things. That DCS LAN line I mentioned can be running hundreds of watts of power along that line. Don't plug your laptop into the DCS LAN ports. It won't like it. You might get a little bit of smoke. It has happened on occasion. Generally, you're safe, but if you plug directly in on a short run, you could see some funky things happen to your lovely laptop. So what are our applications? For something like a city council, we've got, they need to be identified who's speaking. Again, we can use NFC cards. These can be programmed via Software 6000 or via our little NFC card programmer. We can also identify participants by using the sign. We need to put up an agenda. We can do that all through Software 6000. And if we need to record our votes, we can do that through Software 6000 Vote. An international conference, we need 28 channels of interpretation. We can do up to 31 with this system. Agenda and voting is all going to be done with our software, and then we're going to display the agenda throughout the room using our CDAs. Now we're going to look at a little smaller system, which I think gets overlooked. Sometimes we kind of look a little too big with this system, but say 12 in a boardroom. We could certainly do that with this product. Participant ID would be done with the NFC card slot. We don't need recorded voting. We're just going to do an ad hoc vote, so we can do that through the MXC software, no problem. And then we need one channel of interpretation because this is at Toyota headquarters, and 2 gentlemen are coming in from Japan today, so we're going to have an interpreter just sitting in a different room translating into Japanese for them, and we can do that all just built right into the MXC unit. One of the issues in the past with this, I keep talking about that DCS LAN, was figuring out the power. In the past, you would have to design your system, figure out that you're going to need 24 delegate stations, you're going to need 2 more chairmen on top of that. Is it going to work? In the past, we had no way to know, so you would have to figure out your cable lengths, send that all off to Denmark, and then they would put it through their computer program and tell you whether or not the system was going to work. Might take 2 or 3 days, might take a week. Now you can go on to DCSLAN.sure.com and log into this software. It'll allow you to design your system, and it'll tell you whether or not you're going to have enough power to make it work. If you do get a warning that it's not going to work, you can insert a power inserter, or it'll make recommendations for you on how to fix it to get it to work. Another good thing to notice that we've changed now is if you do call in for service on this product, you are calling Chicago now, not Europe. So you can get information that day. Tim Veer and Dave Mendez are the 2 guys in Chicago that are kind of the experts on this product. But I think there's a lot more resources now available than there was a year ago for this product. One of the things we overlooked too, I kind of mentioned briefly this boardroom. I think rental applications for this get missed as well. If you know of anyone in that world, this is easily deployable. It's a single wire. You can just do a quick daisy chain, run 14, 18 units for a standard room. You can be done in 15 minutes and up and running a meeting. So there is that option as well. This is MAP pricing on all of the units. And if anyone would like these presentations, we can certainly give you a digital copy of these slide decks. And then there's your feature license and software 6000 pricing. So what does that break down to? 24 units of MXC using the 620. You're going to be right around $23,000, so less than $1,000 a seat. Now you're going to need, if you want to add some additional capabilities and add the software, you're looking at $26,000, so just a little over $1,000 a seat. So adding that software 6000 isn't a huge expense when you consider the cost of the overall system. Okay, I'm right on time. It really feels like I'm blowing through that thing so fast. However, we are going to ask our actors to come up here. We're going to take you guys through a very cheesy representation of a city council meeting. I will warn you that everything in this meeting is real. These votes did happen, and these laws are real. So if you can indulge us for 5 minutes or so, we'll get this done. And then we'll talk about what happened during the meeting and how Software 6000 and MXC works while we're running things like this. Thanks, everybody.
Just there. Okay, thank you. Wow, this is a fancy schmancy kind of system. How did you know how to do that?
If you remember that email about training, the one you scrapped immediately and ignored.
Well,
Training.
la-di-da. I thought that was just paid nap time anyway. All right, let's move forward with the agenda.
Here we go. Okay.
Wow, that's magic. How'd you do that?
It's magic. I pressed the button.
I turned him on from over here, Miss Mayor.
Isn't that giving you a little bit too much power?
Well, that's what you get for going to training.
Okay. Let's get started. Our first agenda item for today is the public comment and then vote of Proposal 617, which reads, "No person shall attempt to sell pickles that do not bounce when dropped from 1 foot and are therefore unfit for human consumption."
Unfortunately, there seems to be an epidemic of pickle rustlers around here. I myself bought a bad jar of pickles at the local corner store. I took one bite and knew they were the phony pickles. Can you believe it? A pickle with no crunch?
Up the floor for discussion.
Councilman number 2, you're leaning too close and you're snoring too loud.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
You need some coffee?
No, I'm good.
I'm getting the hang of this.
Is there any public discussion on Proposal 617?
With all due respect, council, this is the wrong sheet. Thank you. Speaker 1. Thank you, Mayor. I have a serious matter to discuss today, and I can do it in 2 words. 2 words.
Sweet.
2 words.
Brief and pithy. I like it. City clerk, start that timer.
I don't really need to start the timer because it sort of does it automatically when you turn his mic on. He's run out of time, but a few more seconds maybe.
Food freedom. Food freedom. Thank you very much.
Food freedom. What the heck does that mean anyway?
Mayor, this isn't a debate. It's simply a forum. Comments have been recorded. Are there any other comments?
Whatever.
No further discussion on then the council will vote on Proposal 617.
All those in favor of requiring pickles to bounce before consuming them, say aye.
Miss Mayor, again, training would have been handy. We don't need to say aye anymore. This new system, it's electronic. We can do the voting online. Forget putting your hand up. Ping pong bats, red and green. If you just press some buttons, maybe that'll help.
So what do I do here?
If you touch your screen in front of you, and everyone else, please feel free to join in as well for the fun and games. There's 3 buttons, yes, abstain, no. I know it's a bit tricky, but which one do you want?
Okie dokie. Can't get easier than that, right? Well,
In theory.
yes, my answer is yes. Pickles should bounce and be crunchy. That's the American way. No? Seriously?
I don't like the thought of eating a pickle that's been on the floor.
Well, I'm sure they would clean it off. You're still a nay? Whatever. No matter. We win. The ayes have the vote.
The ayes have the vote. The ayes have the vote. Proposal 617 passes. Sorry.
Next item is Proposal 618, which reads, "It is hereby deemed a felony and therefore illegal for anyone to knowingly poach a Sasquatch in the county with a fine of $1,000 and up to a year in jail." We'll open the floor for public discussion.
With all due respect, council, this is completely unnecessary and would further hurt this community economically. We get lots of curious folks walking around these woods looking for Sasquatch, and yes, they are heavily armed. It's for protection. If someone ever did find the hairy beast, just to get a good picture, he could very well rip your arms right off. And besides, the money someone would get for killing a Sasquatch in self-defense would far exceed the fine, so it wouldn't stop people anyway.
Well, alrighty then. Anyone else? Any other comments? No? Okay. Time for the vote. Nay? Seriously? What is wrong with you?
Sasquatch don't exist.
Well, that's a matter of opinion.
Actually, after decades, centuries again, no evidence of such a creature has ever...
Actually, after decades, centuries, I'm really tired of hearing you talk. And I'm glad that common sense has won the day. Anything else on the agenda, Mr. City Clerk?
There's nothing else on the agenda. Technically, we're overriding the not passed, which Michael Moore has started by just pressing no at the back, I'm sure. But he's not sticking to script. But otherwise, nothing else, Your
Then we
Honour.
shall adjourn this meeting.
This meeting is now adjourned. It has been streaming live, and the recording and voting results will be made available very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This meeting is adjourned.
Perry, the Academy's just called. They want to just, look, silliness aside, hopefully that sort of showed you a bit of how the process is working between the CUA, which the clerk's doing, up on the outside screens, and the CDA, which would be in the main room itself. Obviously, as we're flicking through, we're setting subjects. That changes things on the screen as we go along. And what I'm doing over here is turning microphones on and off. You can set the agenda. We could play with a microphone attenuation. If interpretation was taking place, we could keep an eye on that from here as well, change the languages, the relay channels, etc., etc. So there's lots of stuff on here. But it's just to try and show how the system can hopefully address workflow requirements. Have I not turned you on? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
That's very rude of me. Where are you?
Here we go. Does it require someone to sit at a computer to operate the software, or is there a remote that can advance through each bullet point?
You could do this either off a computer. I mean, I've done it off tablets and stuff before as well. If you're just pinging through that way. If you say if someone's wandering the floor to keep an eye on people on the microphones, you can do that way. But yeah, I mean, it's not an app as such. It's using a Surface or something like that. It's effectively a mobile computer. Yeah.
Sure.
The CDAs that we were flicking through, you can automate that process. So as you go through, it will automatically bring up a different CDA. So I don't know if it was apparent, but whenever we changed the to the next section, the next subject, it would then bring that up in a bit more information, then go back to the agenda and speaker list. It could be you want to have the picture of the people who are speaking, or maybe if they're political party information. There's a whole host of things you can do, depending on how tricky you want to make it or not. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can do an awful lot, and sometimes it can scare people, but we can play with it. We could also say we had different timers for speakers, so it could be that, I don't know, maybe a chairperson has no speech time limit because they're just controlling the meeting the whole way through. Maybe councillors or clerks have a minute, someone from the floor 30 seconds. It depends what suits your council. We can do a whole host of things. We did the voting there with just the 3 buttons. You could do 3 buttons, 5 buttons. Where I did muck about just because I'm sad we have a Brexit-Smexit vote. If we look on your screens there, because we haven't got a clue what we want to do in the UK, you've got definitely not, no way, rather not, or no clue. So you can set that for any way you wish. It depends what you wish to achieve.
Awesome, thank you.
That's basically what we have, no clue. Any other questions? Any recommendations of acting school classes? That's it. I think we're done for the day. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. Obviously, if there's any questions, please let us know and stick around and we'll try and answer them for you. But thank you for your time. Very much appreciated. Thank you, gents. that camera up there is already on me, but if I was to change to this one as well, actually, no, if I turn to this, if I just hit that mic again, so you see where this camera is at the moment?
Yes.
No, I hope this now works. See, that's automatically on here.
No, you programmed those lights.
I programmed them on each
These
position.
to go to each position.
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as your mic's live, we're on. If I just press the button, which is somewhat safer.
Yeah.
So you see we now do a split between the two mics are live, so my mic at the front here and this
Yeah.
one here.
Okay.
Turn my mic off, this one itself will come on, full screen.
Nice.
Now, because with the way we set up at the moment, that camera's on that. So I turn this mic on, he's already occupied. So it won't jump
Until he's.
Whereas we had two at the back, so I could have.
For that drive, it didn't derail, but they are going to want to.
Thanks a lot. I didn't get to meet you.
But yeah, I think two front, two up, and then the initial set eight. This is my first choice camera, the angle, and this is my second choice. This one's really visual. Now, we're just setting up a TCP/IP to one beyond.
That's for,
But we can
this, the way to do it is exactly the way that Paris or Civil shows here, but you have to go over the tech manual of each station. So, you know, depending on how your facility is set up and how many stations, right? If it's like, oh, we're doing it for like 80,
Who said what?
so hopefully that'll go.
Yeah, so we understand this.
I intentionally did that one
One beyond is offensive to this stuff.
Yeah, and then it went make it, yeah, so it's.
Hey, look at our analysis.
Yeah.
Studio box, you take it.
But I can have very
Cameras,
specific.
they also use auto tracking, so they do lots of stuff.
Well, we can do it via Dante, we can just.
So it's more tracking. Yes, one's following me and one's also sitting on the screen. And then they start.
So, was not a deal breaker.
Can you route the analog IOs to the Dante? Vice versa?
Well, yes, because you could make the analog IO part of one of the mixers.
I like your, that's a really good follow.
Pretty it's very flexible, like, as far as what you can do to get from the audio out of it. It's somebody get this back to market. So, yeah, and that's cool because I've talked to a lot of integrators that are like, well, you know, thinking about using something like a session-based or,
And again, it doesn't have to be one
system,
you could try
but
this out.
then ultimately ended up over-engineering those systems, so we got spooked because we couldn't figure out how we were gonna get this system up to the rest of the system.
Yeah,
Made
and
sense
then
for
it's
the
like a
funnel.
gooseneck and, you know,
Yeah.
like an Aterotech Dante.
Exactly, and so from this standpoint, I think we really jump into the sweet spot where it's like, okay, well, given the folks, how great our systems are, you know, but still more time to play with that.
That's I think one is if you're here,
But it's the listening portion
when I was renting,
because here you're talking about the floor conversation. We're talking about, I kind of work with
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's MXC.
But if there's speakers in your room that are going
from our stand, we had 250.
You know, my experience has been effective, but that is definitely a industry. And I think we want to and do it.
Yeah, because it goes so in gas.
Being stuck with that same just text, if it drops out.
What I didn't want to step in and do is like, you guys are not talking about.
Well, you know, and then you asked about.
You know what I mean? And it's basically like, correct.
And certainly,
I'm looking at that, I'm just gonna buy one for a minute, because the thing that actually needs to happen is.
you're getting into like 67.
It's not just here.
But then wireless and high density.
What are you doing?
Latency. You're just gonna get a little bit of
What are the types of
and you know, so, and there's no way around that. So this is a much better, and quite frankly, when you give this kind of channel, it starts to scale really well, because
then it's, okay, based on all of the things that talk about how you use things and how your event space is going to use.
So that one's 0, 0.
It starts to, it's interesting how it starts to scale.
No, it's not this, it would be the, think about that, what do you do with all of that, you know?
Well, that's, it starts to get a little messy.
Yeah, then you got a whole bunch of.
Show you,
Yeah, and then there's
I saw that for just a second, I thought it was beer on the corner of my eye, I went, wow, that's, they start early
it's
here.
Thursday.
come in and have this discussion.
I better shift into checking on who's coming next here, so.
You need time. Part of it too is. Yeah, you can send it that way. As long as you coach all these players. But now let's have a working discussion. I don't know. Check.
Well, these guys, your first point of call, but anything we can help with, let us know.
Okay. So, yeah. Yep. So we just need, 6 more market, guys.
Yes, is that, it's not, I'm gonna say dropped, I think it's one off the truck.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony.
My absolute pleasure, thanks for coming along.
And it's
Take care.
now, in this meeting,
Yeah.
but it's also, my
work, so, yep.
Check, 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, check, 1, 2. Yep, okay, and
The, one out. The distance is incredible.
yes, check, wow, yes, check, 1, 2.
So,
Yep.
so when you talked to this one, you had to be kind of right on it.
I'd be close up on it, sure, yep, 1,
This
2.
this is going to give you the freedom in a lot of your events where people who sit back from the microphone,
Which they do.
they do. Everybody does. Nobody wants to put their face right into it.
Right.
So you might want to consider if you're doing this to do the short gooseneck, which is also a shotgun microphone, which is going to give you that distance. It's pretty incredible.
sound.
Actually, you know what I'll do is,
Okay, good morning, everybody. Before I sit down, I'm Ben Cook from Shure. I do market development up in Canada. So when my accent shows up, try not to laugh too much when I say things like oot and a boot and processor. Today in the room, we've got all of our friends from SK Mac, who all just actually ran out of the room. Here as well, we've got Anthony from Dubai, we got Troy from New York, we got Michael from Nashville, we got Vanessa from Connecticut. And then fairly new to our team is Joe DeFalco, based out of Baton Rouge, right? Who's the regional sales manager for this part of the country for sure. So I'd encourage you to say hello before you leave. He might be a good resource to have available here. And then I think we know our friends from SK Mac. If you don't, we need to have a conversation with our friends from SK Mac.
I'm not going to take that from a Canadian.
Well, then you need to leave. Okay, so I'm going to have a seat. Now, you're going to have to forgive me, gentlemen. We have what I would generally take 2 or 3 hours to go through. We have 45 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. There are some things that I'm going to breeze over that if you'd like more information, I'm happy to give my email address or one of the gentlemen here or Vanessa would be able to help you out with more details. What I want you to go away with today, though, is some of this product can be a little scary, and I want you to leave today with some confidence knowing that it's not that scary. It just works, and we have kind of figured this out. So we'll proceed. First thing I'm going to talk about is... Don't even get me started, man. So it's now a 3-game series against Boston, as I cry a little bit last night. So they all went out for dinner last night, and I bailed and went to a crappy little sports bar so I could watch hockey. So Caps play tonight, yep. Hopefully they play tonight. They didn't play the other night, so. Hey, it was 5-0, come on. The best part of the game was Ovechkin feeding that kid a right hand. That was pretty good.
House lose a crowd, 1-0.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the 5900 series. So this is a holdover from DIS. How many of you are familiar with 5900 series? A couple? Okay, so DIS was Danish interpretation systems that Shure purchased 7 or so years ago to get into this conferencing market, okay? The 5900 series has been very successful for us, and we're keeping it around as more of the entry-level discussion system as opposed to a full-fledged conference system. So how does the 5900 series compare? It's got excellent sound quality, very easy setup, few components, but does allow for multi-language operation. How many of you in the room deal with interpretation? Oh, a few. Okay, good. For us in Canada, it's a requirement. Every meeting by law has to be in English and French, every single public meeting. I know in the US you don't have that requirement, but things are changing, I think, in the States. And having the ability to have a separate language is certainly going to be more helpful as things go forward. So what are the core components of the 5900 series? The first is the brain, which is the DDS 5900. This is the central unit that offers power for all of the units. It offers your auto mixer, it's your control unit, and your systems interface. So this gives you 2 analog outputs and 8 inputs. It offers the control unit for all of your microphones and other audio-related aspects. It's your interface to go out to a house system or recording system. You can operate up to 250 units if you inject some additional power into the line. On its own, it can operate about 60 units. It does have a built-in web browser interface to give you control over your meetings, but basic setup is available from the front LCD display. I did mention 2 analog inputs and 8 outputs. It also has an additional EEM circuit that would allow for emergency evacuation. That would close the circuit and override the entire system for emergency management. The browser-based interface allows you to assign seat numbers and control your meeting, essentially. Microphone on and off, speak and request lists, but all very simple controls. Ad hoc voting is an option where in this system, actually there is no voting in this system, excuse me, but MXCW and MXC will allow for voting. So we're going to talk about those in a little bit. What are the core components of the 5900 series? The 5980 is the desktop model. This unit is configurable as a chairman, interpreter, or a delegate. And the delegate options are with speak or with speak and mute. The way that you accomplish this is purchasing overlays that you put on the unit that change the unit. And that's how you affect it. You effectively change it from a chairman to a delegate, depending on which of these overlays you have. Also in the line is the flush mount. So same functionality, but instead of being a tabletop model, this would be installed in a desk somewhere or a tabletop for a more permanent application, whereas the portable ones would be more for your rental applications or to be deployed as a per meeting basis. Also with this, the flush mount has 2 options for the plates on top of the flush mount. And again, depending on which of these button selections are installed, that changes the function of the unit from a chairman to a delegate to a dual delegate, all of those options. The microphone accessories that are available, there's a 16 or 20-inch microphone, as well as the new shotgun that is not to scale. That would be the largest shotgun Mike Sure has ever made. There are some MXC models out here with the shotgun in front of them. The reason I like it is I find as the day goes on, people have a tendency to stop leaning into the microphone and they start leaning back, and the shotgun will still pick them up, whereas the standard cardioid capsule, you're going to lose that as they lean back a little bit. Something you're going to hear a few times in my presentation today is DCS LAN. So you'll see all of the MXC that's connected in front of you here that's just using a single cable. 5900 series uses that same protocol. It's a proprietary bus that Shure uses for audio, program, control, and power. So in the past, we have published our specifications for these wires and highly recommended that you use them. Now we are requiring it that you use Shure cables for your installations. Why? 95% of failures are because of the cables. It's not because of the product itself. It's because of bad cable termination. If you mix a pin, if your installer crimps the wrong pin, it'll just shut the entire system down. You'll have microphones flashing everywhere and it just won't function. So these cables are available in 9 lengths from 2 feet to 150 feet. If you need to do structured cabling, where you're going to be pulling through a conduit, we will give you the specifications for the wire, but we'll recommend that you terminate female to female. The reason for that being the female connector is a lot easier to make that connection properly, whereas when you're crimping a male end, the chances for failure are a little higher. So we're going to do female to female on the structure and then use our cables to patch into the system. There are numerous other accessories available for DCS LAN, that proprietary bus that we're talking about for the cabling. These are the same accessories that you're going to use for the new MXC that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But keep in mind, Shure still sells all of these products that allow for junction boxes for signal splitting. You've got power inserters, so you can add more power to the lines, which will allow you to power more units. You've got signal repeaters that are going to refresh that signal to keep it on a consistent level. You've got a DCS LAN switcher, which allows, say you're going to have one room that doesn't get used all the time. You would install this in the room that you can plug in as required and then remove that system from that room. You've got audio outputs so that you can inject audio or take the audio off the DCS LAN and put it in another environment. And then you've got redundant controller options as well. This gets more into the permanent installs where it absolutely cannot fail. You can have 2 head units. If one of the head units fail, then it would default to the second unit and allow your meeting to continue to operate seamlessly. There's also a lot of accessories for headphones, interpreter headsets. The one I like to point out is the stereo stethoscope. Any cultures that require a headdress or hairstyles that you don't want to disturb, you can use that stethoscope. And the other one that's kind of important is that mono ear clip, where people are still going to want to be able to hear the live floor feed, but they want to hear a different language in one ear so they can make sure they're following along properly. That's an option. So this is kind of the standard system diagram. We're showing a little more complex system here because you'll see we're using a digital transmitter. If we had a balcony where people aren't going to be required to participate in the meeting other than listening, you could have them all up there with infrared headphones to be able to follow along with the meeting. You can also do channel selection there. They could be listening to up to 31 different program channels for either language or other information that you'd be sending them over the IR transmitter. You'll notice here in the second row, we've got one chairman and 4 delegate stations, and then we've got a couple of interpreters that would be in a different room interpreting the meeting. Again, guys, I know I'm blowing through this. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, okay? Any questions on 5900 series before we move on? So what I want you to take away from that is that's the entry-level discussion system. Not so much a conference system because you don't have that full meeting control. So now we're going to look at Microflex Complete Wireless. And what does this do? This is the only time I'm going to read directly from the slide. It is an integrated wireless audio system designed for the conference and meeting space. Quick and easy setup that delivers intelligent audio, improving meeting productivity. That is the pure, sure marketing line. What are the benefits of this product? It's secure. It's got built-in AES encryption with a browser login that can be password protected. It's simple setup. You can turn on that access point and turn on your delegate stations and your meeting is up and running. It's scalable. You can do up to 125 units off a single access point. The RF is all self-managed. You don't need a person to come in and find out what frequencies you have available. It'll take care of all of that for you. It's an extended runtime. The Shure publishes a spec of 11 hours on these batteries. It's more like 12 to 13 hours of runtime. Shure is always very humble about their specifications, and this is another one where they've sold themselves a little short. It's interoperable. The unit itself has analog in and out as well as digital in and out with the Dante network. So this is the entire system, and I'm going to take you through each of these pieces with just a couple of moments on each one. Not sure why that went black. Okay, so this is the access point. I mentioned it can control up to 125 units. It operates in 2.4 or 5 gig, not Wi-Fi. They are spectrums outside the Wi-Fi spectrum. Okay, so when you see 5 gig, a lot of people think 5G. That is a different frequency than what we're using. It's got the automatic interference and detection. It's 128-bit AES encryption, 1 analog in and out, and then 10 channels of Dante in and out. The LCD on the front here, you can see on the unit over here to my right, that'll allow you to do most configuration. It shows your IP address, allows you to configure just about everything. In order to get into a more complex situation, you're going to go into the embedded GUI, which gives you control over the entire system. And that's just an IP-based, web-based GUI. It is powered from a single PoE connection, and that handles your power as well as your audio transfer and your Dante and all of your control over that connection. There's only one base unit. It's the MXC W640. How do we do that? We allow you to select what that unit does. It can be a chairman, a delegate, a listener, or an ambient unit. In the future, we'll be adding dual delegate with a new firmware update. That's coming in the next few months. It does have a touchscreen display that allows you to do all of your configuration and your meeting control from it. It's got a built-in loudspeaker for program audio. And then on the sides, it's got dual headphone jacks with volume controls. As soon as you plug in headphones, it'll give you the option to either listen to the floor, or if we were routing another channel for interpretation, you would select that channel and hear that through the headphones. It does have a 3.5 millimeter TRRS input on the back that we'll talk about for remote participant, and a micro USB. So if you're in a marathon 12-hour, 13-hour meeting and you realize you're getting low near the end, you could power them from any micro USB phone charger and just plug it into the back of the unit and it'll keep it alive for you. The network charging station, we have 2 of them at the back. They hold up to 10 batteries. They've got all of what you would expect in regards to the batteries. You can see all the battery health. You can see how many times they've been cycled. Total time to charge is 1.5 hours for 50% and 4 hours for a full charge. It's tabletop, rack, or wall mountable. It does just have the key slots in it to mount it however you would need it. It's temperature controlled. Cool thing with it, for me in particular, shipping a bunch of stuff around Canada, is you can put the batteries in storage mode and it'll discharge them to about 30%, which is the safe transport level for TSA and the CRTC in Canada. The battery itself is a 3-cell lithium ion that gives you, again, sure says 11 hours. The battery is included with the units. So when you're ordering these or specifying them, keep that in mind. You do not need to order batteries. They come with them. I'd recommend ordering a few spares so that if you're in the middle of a super long meeting, it's nice to have a few batteries in the back that you can hot swap and throw a new battery in. It takes about 45 seconds for these things once you pull the battery and pop the battery back in for it to power cycle and reattach to the access point and start passing audio again in less than a minute. So that is a viable option for a long meeting. You do have a 5-segment LED on it as well to check your power levels. Should you need it. There's also a window in the bottom. If the unit is off and for some reason you don't want to pull the battery, you can look at that LED status from the bottom as well. Gooseneck microphone options. It is a 16 or 20-inch microphone available. And then we've also added the shotgun element as well. It's a cardioid pattern that ships as standard with these units, but you can switch to an Omni if you were doing a ambient microphone. Is everybody familiar what an ambient mic is? If you had a meeting where perhaps there's going to be a far side listener, you might want to put an ambient mic in so that there's always that little bit of background noise so they know they're still connected to the room. If it's dead silent, people will start freaking out thinking they've been disconnected from the room, so you would put an ambient in. But you can also add a supercardioid. Any of the MXW capsules will work with this system. It's got a bicolored LED. Another neat feature, the rest of the world, Canada included, red means speak, like these MXC models. Red means live mic. A lot of my American friends don't like that. Green means go. So you should be able to hit a green button and it'll come on. You can change that in this software. So green would be go and red would be mute. You can do that with this as well. It does have CommShield technology, which is Sure's proprietary technology for complete RF immunity. So you don't have to worry about your cell phone bleeding into the system and hearing those pops and hisses we used to hear all the time when someone got a text in the middle of a meeting. You don't need to worry about that with these. Applications. Let's say you've got a structured meeting, you need to set some permissions and time limits. We can do that through the embedded GUI. We can do quick participation identification with the NFC card slot. So if you look at the units, actually, if you guys want to take a minute and just throw the battery in the unit in front of you, what it's going to do is, as soon as the battery comes in, it's going to remember the state that it was in when the battery was removed. So had these units been off when I pulled the batteries, they would stay off when you put the battery in. These were on when I pulled the batteries, so they should automatically come on for you. Okay, I'll get mine going here as well. Something Shure did that was really smart, I think, is instead of developing our own NFC card programmer and charging you lots and lots of money for it because it's Shure branded, this is available online, and we can give you the product that you're going to order for this. They're $35 on Amazon. The cards are available from Shure. We offer a small free software package that you're going to download, plug this in, and as people enter the room, you can program 2 fields on this. It's set up as first name and last name. I like to use the first name field as the name and the second name field as the company that they're with or their position, depending on what you're doing. And then when you insert your card in the side of the unit, it's going to, instead of just coming up as a seat name, it's going to come up with their name and position, so then you know who's speaking. You can also change that through the GUI. If I was having a structured meeting and I knew where everyone was going to be sitting, I could type their names in, so then when they would speak, it would come up as their name instead of just a generic seat number. So I'll turn this system off. So now I'm running through the wireless system. Okay. So you saw that took 45, 50 seconds to get me up and running in this room. We're not using any other sound reinforcement in here. This is the This is what you're going to expect from this system. Something we've added very recently is voting, and I can control that from my unit. You'll see I'm not on the laptop at all. I'd like to have a quick vote here. If you notice any of the screens in front of you, you're going to come up with the ability to vote. Yes, abstain, or no is a 3-button vote. As soon as we came out with the firmware and added the voting, New Zealand freaked out because New Zealand does not allow 3-button voting. They are 2-button only. You can't abstain in New Zealand. And their legislators right now are using about a 400-piece system of this, spread over 5 APTs actually. So we just had to update the firmware, put in 2-button voting, and now they've launched 2-button voting, so you can't abstain. When I stop the voting here, as the chairman, now it shows me my voting results. If I had a laptop or another computer logged into this access point, we could display the voting results on the screen. It's not a recorded vote, so there is no like voting report. It's just an ad hoc vote for when you're doing a quick vote. Let's say you've got a flex space, a mobile meeting. That's really what this was designed for. And that's really where I think this thing shines. When they developed it, they spoke about the tea lady in Europe. Right? That was the big push of, instead of her coming in and doing tea and biscuits at 3 o'clock, have her deploy this for the meeting, right? And really, you come in, you plug in your access point, you put these on the tables, it runs. That's it, it's done. You don't have to worry about any other setup. If you'd like to get into it more, where you can change volume levels and mic gains and high pass and low pass filters, you can do all that stuff. But for most of your meetings, you're just gonna turn it on and let it go and let it run.
Can you capture the voting data like after the meeting?
You cannot. So the only way you would do it would be with a screen grab of some kind, right? If you were running an admin laptop, you could just do a screen share and pull that data. But it doesn't record who voted for what. It just records the overall vote. Okay.
And there's no local volume control for this?
There is not. So that volume control is for the headphone outputs.
Okay.
Okay. For the loudspeaker volume control, the chairman can control the overall volume of the entire system, right? Or if you're in the admin, you can change the loudspeaker output of each individual units, as well as the microphone gain. So if I was running a meeting and I realized 5 minutes into the meeting that you're right on the mic, I can bring you down as the administrator. If we've got another person who's leaning back, I can bring their gain up as the person running that meeting. Okay. So you do have that flexibility. Yes?
Does it record their name as they open the mic? Or is that?
So as you open the mic, it displays it, it doesn't record it.
Okay.
Right? So there is no like meeting log of who spoke when. That doesn't happen with this. With the MXC system, that's something we can implement, but with the wireless, again, this is an ad hoc vote, it doesn't record it.
That will be coming somewhere down the line, but yes, we want to launch this as soon as possible and not keep letting engineering play with it forever, otherwise we'll never see it in the marketplace. But they certainly have a long list of things to add to this and bring it up to the functionality of the MXC as well.
And I think Anthony brings up an important point. This product was launched 2 years ago, or introduced 2 years ago, and didn't actually start shipping until the last few months. And it was because the horsepower that's in this system, they were trying to unlock everything at once and finally realized, let's get it out. Like, it works now, and we can talk to our customers, we can talk to our end users, and as we find ways that they're using it, then we will add those firmware updates to change how these things work. And that New Zealand voting is the perfect example of it. They kind of lost their minds a little bit and emailed us back and said, great, we got the voting, but it's not what we need. And within a week, they were able to change it and get it working. So as we go forward, dealing with the Ontario government in Canada, I didn't realize about the ability to do the reply function, where you can have a request to speak list, but if I decide I want you to answer me, if I turn on your mic, you're now out of the request to speak list, right? So we're gonna have to add a function where you still stay in that list, you answer me, but then you keep your place. Little things like that will tweak as we go along. Yes?
It has a function that limits how many mic can be hot at one time?
Yes, so you can have up to 8 open mics.
Okay.
If you have 8 open mics in a meeting, it's no longer a meeting.
Yes.
But
yeah.
you can certainly do that. And that's all selectable via the GUI. You can have as low as 1 or as many as 8.
And there's no auto mixing function with this system as well, like all mics can be on and it's just automatic.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it?
So we can set priorities.
Okay.
So if we're doing a VIP meeting where you've got people on the dais, I can set them as one priority, then I can set the first row as the next priority, and then the next row as the next one, so that if I'm speaking, you can't interrupt me, but I can interrupt you. We can set all of those things in the GUI.
If you're referring to like a Fox mode, so in theory it's all or on. In a traditional system that's not a discussion system, you know, you'd have 32 mics going into 32 channels of DSP with 32 outputs with 32 speakers, right? Gain shaded and cross mixed. With this, what's coming down the pike will be a Fox mode that would give you that virtual auto mix,
Okay.
where you wouldn't have to touch a button, but it would, in theory, allow you to have all mics open at one time, so to speak, even though the mics physically wouldn't be on at one time.
Activate. Cool. Well, we have some time at the customer that's participating in the meeting, they forget to press their button.
Right.
And a lot of times, I don't like to like hang out in the room while they having their meeting. I like to be able to walk away. And but there's just something that happens common.
See, I don't particularly, personally, I don't like Vox,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just, it's chaos, right? Whereas at least I like, and maybe it's because I'm Canadian, I don't know, maybe there's a little more structure to our meetings where, no, you wait your turn and
Yeah.
then you speak.
Then,
right?
then you press your button like.
And again, that might be a Canadian thing. They always joke that the Americans fought their way out of Britain. We were kicked out when we got to like 45 years old. They were like, okay, you need to leave now. That's the Canadian way, so you'll have to forgive me. So this gives you an idea of a typical system. You've got your wireless conference units. You've got your laptop connected to the PoE switch that in turn is powering the access point. In this example, we're using the analog input to bring in a wireless handheld system into the unit. And then we're taking the analog output to some powered speakers to give some sound reinforcement for the room. That may be for an overflow portion of the room, or just to give a little bit of voice lift in the room to bring up the volume if you're dealing in a huge ballroom or something like that. Remote participant uses that TRRS connector I told you about on the back. What this will allow is if Anthony's late for the meeting, I'm going to call him on my cell phone and plug him into one of these units.
Oh wow.
And then that'll allow him to interact with the meeting. So that'll be really handy, I think, for corporate meetings. Your weekly sales budget meeting. The sales guy's not there, not sure why. He's probably out the night before with customers. Yeah, he's on the golf course. The only drawback of that is that you will have to rely on them to mute their microphone on the phone, because they will be keeping that mic channel open so that they can interact with the meeting. Okay. Another neat function I like would be to take the microphone out of one of these units, turn it into a listener only, and then you can bring this into an overflow room or a press box, plug in a pair of powered speakers to it, and now you've got your outside audio feed without using any external hardware. Right? You don't have to run any wires from the access point. You don't have to loop anything else through. You can take this unit and just And I think it depends on the time of day too.
Okay, when you first turn the system
Right.
on, how do you set the seat numbers? Do the mics automatically seek out and like I want number one?
I'm
Look at-
glad you asked. So you have the option. You can either label them and put, okay, this is always going to be seat 1, or you can just do a standard deployment where there is no label whatsoever. You lay them all out, open the interface, and there's a button in there that says push to renumber. So you're going to put push to renumber, and how many seats? Well, there's 24. I'm going to renumber them all. So now you've got them set in the room. You hit push to renumber, and you just go around the room in order and hit the mic button, and it renames the seats for you. Yeah, so very easy. At the end of the meeting, there is an option to turn them all off. You can just go into the GUI and hit turn off all units, and it automatically shut them all down for you to put them away. I like leaving them on because I want to pull the batteries while they're on, so I don't have to turn them back on when I put the batteries back in, just because I'm lazy. So, but it works. Yes, sir.
Big concern of course, of congested Wi-Fi, congested, you know, if you have a law office where they, where they talked about, you know, we've got 100 people on this floor that are on Wi-Fi, we've got a floor below us, you know, and we're in the world of wireless. So what,
Well, and that is one of the biggest benefits of this product, is that we are not operating in Wi-Fi. We're operating in DFS, right? Which is a 5 gig channel. But you can see here in this building, we've got all kinds of DFS channels wide open. We are close enough to the airport that at some point today, you're going to see almost all of those green channels turn orange, because the weather radar is going to send a pulse to just see what's going on with the weather. And then we will evacuate the DFS channels to a standard 5 gig channel until those DFS channels open again. So no one else is operating on those DFS channels. There are no other you can't see this access point through a standard laptop. You're not going to be able to pull up that access point as a Wi-Fi access point. It operates in a completely different spectrum. So this is really one of the biggest strengths of this product, is it's not operating where anyone else is. So
does any other wireless system from your competitors operate DFS?
as far as I know, no. No one else is there.
There's a couple of screen companies I think are looking at it. We've come across that in Europe.
Okay.
But we were at ISE in Amsterdam back in February, and from our stand we could pick up over 250 other wireless access points across this range, and we kept operating over the 4 days, no problem. Some of the competition wouldn't, actually you might find a unit might have been stuck to a desk, so you couldn't walk away with it, just to test it. We're pretty confident in the strength of it. Yes, there always will be some situations where eventually it's just too crowded, and an exhibition floor is a perfect example. It's the worst case scenario to a degree because everyone's got wireless products.
That was a question I had, back to, you mentioned in Europe. Is this DFS, is that standard throughout the globe?
It is.
There are a couple of, it's not as open in Korea. I think Japan has a slight issue with some of the DFS channels, but yes, there will be different. So, not to steal your thunder, but there are different flavors of this APT, and depending on where in the world you are, that will open up or close down certain channels based on jurisdiction.
So I stole my access point from our Rep Fest in Chicago and drove it across the border to Canada, and then realized when I got home that it's illegal. Because in the US, you're allowed to use 3 channels that I'm not. So to stay in compliance, we just removed those channels from the firmware. And now I'm legal in Canada because I'm staying off those 3 channels. So,
So is that an option that I could just change the firmware and access point to make?
well, there's an A, B, and a C access point that you would order. US is A, Canada's B, and then C is rest of world. So it would just depend on where it's going to be deployed. If you end up with the wrong one, you can, with some help from Shure in Chicago, change your model via the software, via the firmware.
When you first turn on, you indicate which territory you're in as well, and that will help set it.
Yeah.
So if you have 2 of these systems working in 2 separate systems in 2 close by rooms, do they interfere with each other? Can they?
No.
Still?
So the way it works is you can choose with these delegate stations, you can choose to have it connect to the last access point that it was connected to, or you can have it scan. right? So if there was always going to be deployed in this room, and we have an access point in this room and an access point in the other room, we can set it that it's only going to attach to this one. If they're going to be flip-flopping back and forth, then we can say, no, when you come on, you choose which access point you're going to be on, and then we can select that way. Another cool feature is if we're doing a high-level corporate board meeting and we don't want to have to worry that anyone else is going to attach one of these to our access point and listen down the hall, we can set it that no, the 10 people that are in this room, it's now a closed meeting, no one else can join, and that access point won't let anyone else on.
As long as that access point,
Can you show that in your software?
Sure.
but as long as that access point is on, if I bring another one up in an adjacent room, it's gonna listen for 60 seconds to differentiate that?
No, that's
DFS?
a different, so one is communication between these units and the access point, right? And the other one is the communication, I'm losing myself now, between which access point you're going to talk to, right?
No, I get that one, but like for the DFS, they'll figure out between the two. who's on.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to jump on the same channel. Yeah. Because one would be detecting that the other one is interfering with it on that channel. So they're always going to go on separate channels.
Go to your settings cogs at the top, yeah.
You can prioritize which access point you want, which microphone to talk to, right?
Down one.
Yes, you can. You can set it that this one is married. I could say always connect to this one, right? Or I can say choose.
Well, but you can have it be, so if you have a room combining system, you have access points in each of the two different rooms.
Mhm.
You can have it default to a particular one, but if the wall's open and it turns the power off for one access point, they can all marry the second one, correct?
No, it doesn't do it by default. You'd have to select it. It won't drop to the second one if the first one's not there.
Depends on the setting you've got. If you've got it to look for, give you a list of whatever it can find, when you turn one off, it will then say detached, and it will start looking for the alternatives.
Yeah.
If you go back to the hardware on the left-hand side, please. Down the button. One more, yeah. So that's where you can set whether any new units, if you like, can attach to an APT or not. So it's a two-gate security, if you like. At the moment, we've got everything open and it's all automatic registration. So if I was to come into the room or sit outside and spy with another unit, it's open, I can attach this access point, and I have permission to automatically join in. If I kept it open but went to manual on the registration, I could attach the access point. I need a technician or a chairperson to allow me into the meeting. I couldn't hear or I couldn't contribute. Or if I just have closed the top one, I just can't access it. I can't come in at all.
So in that situation, I go set up the room, put out the 12 stations, then hit close.
That's it.
I
No
have
one else can come
Then
in.
I hit close. At that point in time, only the 12
Correct.
join station.
Correct. Now I'd suggest it might be an idea to maybe have do it on manual, maybe do 14, and then close it, because then you've got two that are waiting to be registered in case, for whatever reason, this suddenly blows up and thinks it's a toaster. I've got a spare one to just swap it in, without having to fuck about halfway through the meeting. But it's up to you.
So manual would be, I've got 14 set up, somebody grabs one, they're outside trying to listen in. They've joined, they've been able to join.
They've linked,
Right.
but they can't join in, they can't hear.
What's the process of joining at that point?
It's a bit small, but at the bottom right of the screen there is a 0 unregistered units, I believe. That's where they would sit, and you would go in there, select it, register it, and it
So
would
their
then join.
registration is not they're pushing the button.
That's from the GUI, that's a technician. So it might be you have it at the back of the house with you at front of house or whatever it may be, the control position.
So you'd have a list of devices waiting to register, so there's like no PIN number on this or anything.
We could show the 0 number for every unit, if we wish to, yes.
Right, but this one here, following his question, like, if I wanted this unit to join and just
No.
listen out in the hallway, there's no PIN
No,
number.
you can't just
or anything.
put a code in or something, no.
Right.
And it's another alternative, if you like, for either you literally don't want to swap in a battery, or you don't want to plug in the drip feed charger at the back. Literally, the chairperson's there, we've got 20 minutes left, swapping it over, hopefully discreetly while they're halfway through their final closing presentation, whatever it may be.
Okay, I've got to keep moving, guys, or I'm going to have you here for a few hours. So I think, was there any other questions before I move on to?
I just had a quick question. It seems kind of simple, but you know, we're talking about mics and positioning. Since these are mobile, you know, normally you have them up front, so you're having to lean or whatever.
Yep, yeah, just pull it back.
What's wrong with, I'm sitting here, I'm leaning back, I have it right here, I wouldn't have to worry about the mic, it's right in front of me, I can easily hit the button, I don't have to make any,
Yep,
you know?
A lot of people are gonna have glasses.
laptop or,
I
yeah,
understand, but just,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it through a minute, that's one of the things that's a
Yeah.
benefit, that's when you think about it. And I just was curious if there's any reason.
Well, yeah, and there's no reason why okay.
Like the whole unit?
But in the future, that might be a possibility, or we can give you the pin configuration of those to have an outside company make a charger for you. But for right now, Shure has shelved that charging case.
So the idea is just to have the bank of batteries. You have
Correct.
all of these units sitting in a case somewhere, and then
Yep.
you just pop the
Pop the
batteries
batteries
out
out.
and you set them out. Okay.
Different markets had different levels of excitement about the charging case, keeping it as it is.
Yeah.
And it's got to be an economic argument. And if we're going to make it and brand it as a Shure product, it's going to be a bit of a premium on it. A lot of rental companies around the world might rather use their existing case supplier, for instance. They just want to know how to build it and do it themselves. The charging stations are rack mountable. Whatever you do, someone's going to want something slightly different. But it's, again, it's built in there because we could add to it later on without having to redesign the whole thing.
I just saw it and I was
Yeah, sure.
curious.
What does it do? I want to know. Yeah, no, fair enough.
Now, Microflex Complete replaces the DIS 6000 series, which was Danish interpretation systems. This is what it looked like. My favorite is the interpreter. I believe that was pulled from a Russian missile silo. But this is what the new range looks like. So you can get an idea of how much we've cleaned it up. It's been modernized. Everything the function is better. Everything looks better. And most importantly, with DIS, we were not using Shure capsules. With the new product, we are using Shure microphones, which give it the Shure family sound and that quality that you can count on from us. The main brain, again, is that CCU that we used in the 5900 series that's expandable up to 3,800 participants. It's got 4 channels of interpretation included. It's got your built-in GUI, 8 analog outputs and 2 inputs. On its own, it can power up to 50 units. And the new one of the newest things with MXC is that it allows for redundant cabling. There's 4 outputs on the back of this central unit, A, B, C, and D. In the past, you would have daisy-chained everything off of one channel, and if you had a break in the cable, every unit after that would stop working. With the new system now, we can put in it's an MXC ACC RIB. I call it the McRib so that I can remember what it is. If you put one of those in line, it's essentially a gender bender that changes the cable from a go into to a go outa, which allows, if there's a break in the cable now, you can loop this right back into the unit and use 2 of the output channels. And if there's a break in the line, then it would reverse the flow and all of your units would stay on. Okay, so it gives you that level of reliability that DIS, the DCS LAN on its own is very robust and very good. But there are times where you're going to want to have just that level of bulletproof installation, and this allows you to do that.
Does that reduce the number of units to 25?
Well, what it does is it takes up 2 ports instead of 1. So now if you're going to do 2 loops of redundant cabling, you can only run 2 chains. Okay, it's still the same amount of power, right? But now you've only got 2 ports to use it because you've got 2 ports out and 2 returns because you're going redundant. This unit puts out 125 units of dynamic power, 125 watts, sorry, of dynamic power. So that power can be spread out on 1 chain or all 4. So it doesn't affect the number of units you can use, it just affects the number of chains you can have, okay? Something to note, I mentioned before, we use this same CCU with the 5900 series. In order to use it with the MXC series, you do have to purchase a feature license. It's the FL6000, and that's what unlocks the unit to have the ability to control the MXC, okay? I don't want to scare you with these units, so I'm going to go over it fairly quickly and easily. The MXC 620 is the very small unit in front of you guys. There should be a couple on each table. This I want you to think of as just being your participant unit. This doesn't allow for voting. It does have chairman or delegate modes available. It has an NFC card reader for participant identification. It can be dual delegate as well. And it does have Braille. Now, this will be just for speak and listen functions. If you need to add the ability to vote, then we're going to go to the 630, which has all the same interfaces and same use case as the 620, but adds voting. Then if we need to add chairman control and agenda control, meeting management to a unit, then we're going to go to the 640 because you've got your LCD touchscreen on the 640, all right? So those are the 3 portable units. So 620 is conference only, kind of the entry level. 630 allows voting. 640 is voting and control. Now we're going to switch to the flush units. Now, instead of just a standard 620, we have a 620F for flush mount. Same functionality as the 620 portable. It's just, it's the same guts. You're just going to cut the table and mount this into a hole in the table to make it flush mounted. If you need voting, then you're going to go to the 630 flush mount. Again, the same internal components as the 630 portable. It's just a flush mount. So those are the 5 main components of the system. 620, 630, 640, and then 620 and 630 flush. Not scary. There's not a whole lot going on. Very simple. If you need a podium mic where you don't have the space to do a full 620 or 630 flush mount, you can use the MXC MIU. The kind of advantage of this is that it also has a 3-pin XLR input, so you can add audio onto the system, either for background music or perhaps a handheld microphone. You can bring it into the system this way. These flush mount units on the left there, the FS for flush mount small, which is just the microphone input, or FL, which is flush mount large, which would be the microphone and loudspeaker. Those are powered via a lockable HDMI that comes from the MXC MIU unit up to the flush mounted unit. And again, this is for when you've got a podium or you want to mount them in a chair, that kind of thing, maybe in a parliament. Again, I'm speaking Canadian, but because we did that at Global Affairs Canada, where they're mounted in the armrests of the chairs, right? And this is a great way to do that. Right now, it does have 2 outputs. There's an A and a B HDMI out. Right now, you can only use one or the other. And if you're using the XLR, you can't use the microphone. But as we get forward and the firmware gets updated, we'll be able to unlock that functionality as we go forward. The interpreter station, which we have one at the back if you'd like to see, it is the only one currently shipping that is ISO 20109 certified by the European Interpreters Union. So a lot of work went into this to keep the interpreters happy. I've found out over the last few months that the interpreters are a bunch of Mariah Carey-like divas. I had no idea, but I'm learning, and I've actually got a meeting in a couple of weeks with the Canadian Interpreters Union, so I'm looking forward to see how that goes, because I don't speak French, so we'll see. But it does have 8 relay buttons and then 3 outgoing languages. If you don't know what a relay is, it is like a bad game of telephone where you'll have a French translator going from English to French, and then you'll have someone going from French to Spanish, and then someone going from Spanish to German. And each time you do that, it's called a relay. And there are meetings where they're going to have 8 relays, where someone who's going from German to Arabic is listening to an interpretation of someone who listened to an interpretation of someone who listened to an interpretation of someone. So there's just a little bit of lag by the time you get your interpretation, but this is standard practice, and this unit helps to solve it. It does have an integrated loudspeaker. It's on the back of the unit. Why? Because every interpreter booth on the planet is a glass window at the front, so the loudspeaker bounces off the glass to give them any sound reinforcement should they need it. Most of the time they're going to be using headphones, and this does allow the use of our interpreter headset. And it does have an integrated braille and audio cues built in. One of the neat functions with this is with the use of the NFC card, it allows them to save all of their presets on an NFC card or a USB key. And when it's put in the unit, it brings up all of their presets. So, gooseneck mics, same as the MXCW. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. 16 or 20 inch, dual flex or single flex. And then we've also added the shotgun microphone as well. Another great product in this line is the MXC sign, which is a dual-sided name sign. I've got a few of them up here, and you're going to get to see these in use in a few minutes with our bad play we're going to put on for you. It's powered via the DCS LAN. It only takes power when it's being programmed. So when you build a system, you don't need to worry about how much power this is going to be pulling all the time, because it only pulls it as it's being programmed. It's single or dual participant. You can select it down the middle to decide if we're going to share a sign. I can put my name on one side and another person's name on the other side so that we can save a few dollars that way. It retains your image when it's disconnected. USB programming is coming. Right now it's only programmable via the built-in GUI on MXC or via our Software 6000. There is an option for USB programming coming down the road, but we need to fix a couple things on that before we get there. This trim ring is removable, so it can be permanently flush mounted into a table, or it can be just set on the tabletop. We already spoke about DCS LAN cables. I'll mention it again. These are required now for the system. I know it's not a popular concept, but it is needed. Again, because of the power that these things can be transmitting. It's necessary that each of these cables be tested before they ship, and we test each one of these cables individually.
You say it's required, but does that mean it's a proprietary pinout, or is it just for shielding purposes?
It's because of the shielding. That's really what it comes down to. What's going to happen is if you use your own cables, you're going to call Shure, and they're going to say, switch out to our cables and call us back if your system's not working, right? So I'm just trying to save a headache up front. If you do, did I mention before about structured cabling? So if you do go female to female, that'll help solve a lot of the problems. We can give you the specification. If you want to go out and source your own wires, we will give you the specifications for the wires if you've got a supplier that can do it cheaper than us. But again, if there's a problem with the system, when you call in for service, that's where the rubber's going to hit the road. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I want to spend a couple minutes on feature licenses. I mentioned before, this is the 5900 series CCU that we're going to put a feature license on to make it an MXC CCU. With that standard feature license, you can control up to 250 participants. That says units. That is a lie, and I need to change that slide. If you had 120 of these set up as dual delegates, then that would be 240 participants, right? So keep that in mind. If you need more than 250 participants, you can add on the feature license 6000-3800, which will allow you to control up to 3,800 participants. Interpretation options before getting to Software 6000, which is our software package. Just using the GUI and the unit on its own, you can do up to 31 channels of interpretation depending on which feature license you purchase. Keep in mind, if you needed 18 channels of interpretation, you can't order an 8 and a 16. You have to order the 31. You can't stack your licenses. The user interface controls basic meeting controls. Ad hoc voting, that kind of thing can all be done via the standard GUI. Once you're getting into a more complex meeting where you need agenda control, voting, speech timers, all of that kind of thing, we're going to move into Software 6000. Does anyone here have experience with Software 6000? I've got one. Poor soul. I mean, gentlemen. This is what the SKU list used to look like with Software 6000. All of those SKUs on the left, you had to order piecemeal. And there was no real test to know if it was going to work for you until you were on site and realized, oh crap, we need voting. We didn't order the vote. We need another display application. We didn't order that. Now what Sure's done is taken 28 SKUs and condensed them to 8. I'm getting the time going at the back here. So what we've come up with is the basic suite. This is going to be for 90% of your functionality is going to be covered in that basic suite. It gives you a conference admin app as well as a user application, and then all of the functionality on the right, your meeting creation, messaging, microphone control, your synoptic views, that's all included in that basic package. As you need to add on more to it, you can add more CAAs, which is your admin app, more CUAs, your user apps, and more CDAs, which is your display application. I still don't know why they have a Canadian doing this, because every time I want to do CUAA, and I have to stop myself. So you can also add on voting, advanced control for up to 50 mics or more than 50, depending on the license you purchase, and then your ESI, which gives you control over your streaming and APIs out. Quick system at a glance, give you an idea. I want you to leave today knowing DCS LAN is not Ethernet. Don't confuse the two, please, and don't plug in a laptop into one of the DCS LAN outputs on the back of the CCU that's going to pump 125 watts into your laptop. It won't like it, and I'm not buying you a new laptop, so keep that in mind. So it is two separate systems. What are our applications? Standard City Council, they need participant identification. We're going to do that via the NFC card and the name sign. We're going to run the agenda through Software 6000, and then we're going to do voting using the Software 6000 add-on. For an international conference, we're going to need 28 channels of interpretation, so we're going to purchase that 31-channel license. We're going to do all of our agenda and voting through the Software 6000, and then we're going to do our displays via the CDA. For a more typical application, where we've got, say, 12 in a room for a boardroom meeting, we're going to do quick identification with the NFC card slot. We're going to do voting, just an ad hoc vote through the standard GUI with no recording of the vote. And then let's say we're doing this at Nissan and one of our friends from Japan has come in for that meeting. We're going to do one channel of interpretation so he can have a single earpiece on, listening in Japanese, so he can make sure he's following along. And we're just going to do one channel. That can all be done with no additional software. We don't need that Software 6000 package. We can do that just as the standard MXC. One of the issues in the past with this product was if you designed a system, depending on your cable length, that's going to be a different power draw. Depending on which units you're using, it's a different power draw. We never knew if the system was going to work or not. And what would happen is someone would have to design the system, write down all the cable lengths, all the units they're going to use. It would get sent off to Europe, to Copenhagen. Someone over there would crunch the math and come back to you in a few days and tell you whether or not it was going to work. Now we can go on to dcslan.shure.com and build our system on that software package, and it will tell you if your system's going to work. If it's not, it's going to recommend to you where to put some power inserters on to put some additional power onto the line. It's going to tell you how to maybe route things a little differently, and you can plan it all out in that software in real time to know if your system's going to work. Something else I want to point out, in the past, if you called for assistance with this, you were calling Denmark. You are no longer doing that. You are calling Chicago. So we are on Central Time, which is helpful for most of the country. At least there's going to be a few hour window where you can get a hold of them during the day and get an answer that day. We have 2 guys dedicated to this product in Chicago at all times. So feel free to give them a call anytime. You can use service@sure.com or support@sure.com as an email address as well. There's our pricing. And if anyone would like this slide deck, I'd be happy to provide it to you as well if you want to look at it later on. I can also give you a YouTube key, a YouTube link to a private YouTube channel that has 32 different between 3 and 5 minute videos on how to set up the software and how to use the software. I've found them invaluable because you don't use the software every day and you have a tendency to forget how things work, but that'll take you through it. Quick system pricing. So without software for a 24 seat system, just using the 640s, you're going to be just under $23,000 or $1,000 a seat. When you add the software, it's going to add about $3,000 to the system. But still, that just puts you over, just slightly over $1,000 a seat. So it is, I think what gets forgot with this is, yes, it can be complicated. It can also be very simple. It can be permanently installed, or it can be a rental system, depending on what you need. We set this room up in less than an hour. So, you know, there are options available. Okay, I'm 10 minutes over. I apologize. We're going to do our quick bad acting city council meeting to show you guys how this would be used in kind of an atypical application. And then Anthony will run you through how he controlled the meeting to give you an idea of how that gets used in a real life situation. So I'll be floating around after. If anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I apologize for keeping you a little longer than we intended, but we'll get these bad actors up here and get moving.
Just before we start, so obviously the idea here is on the 2 outside screens, you'll see what's being done by the clerk on the CUA, and the middle screen being the CDA, so that'll be the display application you may see in a typical setup. So follow through on that, and we'll go through it afterwards if there's any questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. City Clerk. This is a fancy schmancy system we've got here. How did you know what to do?
I attended that training that you were too busy to attend.
Well, la-di-da, Mr. City Clerk. I thought those things were just paid nap time anyway. All right, let's move forward with the agenda.
Okay, there I am. Excellent. Okay. I think that's working now. Go ahead.
I'll just jump in on the mayor's line. She was going to ask me how did I do that, and I'm going to say magically, unprompted, because I can control the microphones from here, Mayor.
Wow, isn't that giving you a little bit too much power?
Apparently someone up here's got to do it, yeah.
Okay, maybe we should get started with the meeting. Our first agenda item for today is the public comment and then vote of Proposal 617, which reads, "No person shall attempt to sell pickles that do not bounce when dropped from 1 foot and are therefore unfit for human consumption."
Unfortunately, there seems to be an epidemic of pickle rustlers in these parts. I myself bought a bad jar of pickles at the local store. I took one bite and knew they were the phony pickles. There was no crunch. Can you believe it? A pickle with no crunch?
Open up the floor for discussion.
Councilman number 2? Are you okay?
Oh.
You're snoring.
Oh, pardon me, excuse me.
You need some coffee there, buddy. Getting the hang of this thing here.
Okay. Is there any public discussion on Proposal 617?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a serious matter to discuss today, and I can do it in 2 words.
Sweet, brief, pithy. I like it. City Clerk, start that timer.
I don't need to do that. If you notice that on the screens there, you can see the timer started as soon as the microphone came on, but because we've been wasting a bit of his time, he's running out, so, yep.
Food freedom. Thank you.
Food freedom. What does that mean anyway?
Mayor, this isn't a debate. It's simply a forum. Comments have been recorded. Are there any other comments?
Whatever.
No further discussion. The council will now vote on Proposal 617.
All those in favor of requiring pickles to bounce before consuming, say aye.
Mayor, just may point out, we can also do voting on the system here, this fancy schmancy one you referred to. If you were just to touch on the screen, people would see the options available to them.
Oh, I see. So what do I do here? How do I make this work?
There's 3 buttons. How much simpler do you want me to make it? Are you from New Zealand? You only want 2?
Yes. All right. Looks like it can't get easier than that. Okay, so here we go. Yes, a pickle should bounce. Pickles should be crunchy too, by God. That's the American way. No? Seriously? What's wrong with you?
I don't like the thought of eating a pickle that's been on the floor.
Don't you think they would wash it first? Whatever. It doesn't matter. We win anyway.
The ayes have the vote. The ayes have the vote. Proposal 617 passes.
Next item is Proposal 618, which reads...
Oi.
That quick on the button city clerk going again. Excellent. Next item is Proposal 618, which reads, "It is hereby deemed a felony and therefore illegal for anyone to knowingly poach a Sasquatch in the county with a fine of $1,000 and up to a year in jail." We will open the floor for public discussion.
With all due respect, council, this is completely unnecessary and would further hurt this community economically. We get lots of cursed folk walking around these woods looking for Sasquatch, and yes, they are heavily armed. It's for everyone's protection. If someone did find the hairy beast just to get a good picture, he could very well rip your arms right off. And besides, the money from someone we get from killing a Sasquatch in self-defense, of course, would far exceed the fine, so it wouldn't stop people anyway.
Well, alrighty then. Anyone else? Any other comments from the floor? No? Okay, great. Let's start the vote. You guys can vote on your screen as well. Nay, again? Seriously? What's wrong with you today?
Sasquatch don't exist.
It's a matter of opinion, I believe.
Actually, after
Yeah.
decades, centuries even, no evidence of such a creature has ever...
Actually, after decades, centuries, I'm really tired of hearing you talk. And I'm glad that common sense has won the day. Anything else on the agenda, Mr. Clerk?
No, ma'am. We just need to encourage our voting friends out there to not ruin our script by voting no when we want a yes, but apart from that, it's fine. So, no, we are done.
Then we shall adjourn the meeting.
This meeting has been streaming live online, and it can also be seen in a little while while I put up all the voting results and recordings. Thank you very much. For those of you who wish to watch it again.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
The joys of democracy. Those two items we discussed about the pickles and the Sasquatch are actually real items in certain councils. I can't remember where they're from, but God bless whoever decided to discuss that in depth. That's great. I know we've got some strange rules in the UK, but you lot really do take the pickle. Never mind. Obviously, the idea was to show you what the clerk could be doing on a CUA, which is our user application, and then what was happening on the CDA side of things here. Hopefully, you saw that screen was changing automatically as we move through our subjects. I don't know if there's anything in particular that people want us to look at in depth, or if you'd rather discuss it afterwards, no problem. But from the CUA, we can control quite a few things. We've got the mimic, so we can turn mics on and off. We can also, if people are in a request list, we can turn them on from here, whoever those requesting speak out there. We could have different speech times for different participant roles, so maybe the mayor has no limit, councillors have a certain limit, the people from the floor have a little bit less, potentially. We can update those timers on this side if we wish to, and we can see the results. It is required to come up on certain votes when they were done. Messages could be sent out from here to individual people, so for instance, we've got a couple of predefined messages. There's an emergency, please evacuate the building. Change your mind, come on back in, no problem. If we had interpretation set up, we would be able to see the different languages and booth set up on here, so that if potentially the interpreter is going from English, French, and suddenly there's a question from the floor, they need to go back to French, English. If they haven't pressed the right button and changed over their relay, the technician could do that from this point. That's about it, unless there's any particular questions. This is Software 6000, yeah.
So on this, an AV integrator, normally we're not going to have in-depth knowledge of operating this software.
Sure.
Do you offer a line item of short training or web training or somebody who knows the software in depth to train a client for that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, as Ben mentioned earlier, there's some basic 5-minute sort of YouTube tutorials. I think it's about 24 of those or something. But also, yeah, we need to talk you through it. One of the things that we are going to put together with Michael Moore at the back there is a package of some basic layouts of this for you. I mean, yes, it can achieve a great deal. It's been something that's been built up over about 30 years. There's not a single application in the world that uses more than 45-50% of what this software can do, because it's just, in some ways, too big. But for, I would guess, 90% of the applications for small council meetings all around the world, it's almost a cut and paste. Once we've got one set up, they're going to be doing it on a weekly or a monthly basis. We could set up a new meeting. Simply, we go into a CAA, which is where we set up things. If I take my meeting we've just run, which would be this one here, I copy it. I want to select it, yes. I'm then renaming it. I'm putting a new date on it down here, so it's the latest meeting, whatever it may be. Ignoring the fact I can't spell and everything else. I'm updating. I've got a new meeting. It may be that one person changes, so maybe I'm not going to be in that meeting. I'm going to take myself out of there. Ben Cook's now going to be in this seat here. It could be then we just update that. Sorry, I close that. I go to my agenda. Obviously, before we had proposal 617, 618, so now it's going to be 619, 620, and then we're good. We're off for the races. It can be that quick and easy. But yes, you've got to play with it a bit, and we understand that, so we have to give that support to your guys. It's having too many windows open at once. Sorry, go for it.
To speak more directly to them from the sales point of view and support point of view, their supportless or defenseless with this product. So, first of all, MXC will be covered by Assure. Down, then on top top of that, we have a layer of support where we have given our reps and are continuing to give our reps really in-depth training. In fact, we had an all-day session yesterday with the reps, and we're doing this in every territory. And any territory that doesn't have a roadshow, we're requiring them to send their reps to the training to go through an all-day training to have a layer of support to help there. On top of that, we have the market development personnel that you see in this room that are stationed throughout various parts of the country that provide another layer of further depth of expertise on top of that. And then behind that, we have people that even know deeper than that come from the product development side, the DIS side, and guys like Anthony there that can go as deep as we need to go so that whatever it is that is specified, sold, and implemented, we make sure that it's going to get done right and that it'll be usable and complete the specification. It's not like Shure to sell something and then allow it to hang out.
Well, beyond having a YouTube, certain people are training, those people leave the organization.
Yeah.
You turn Todd's mic on as well. Can you turn Todd's mic on as well?
Yeah.
On-demand stuff from the end user.
Absolutely. Okay.
There is unofficially, through service, there is a daily fee to bring somebody out to site. They're not there to install it. If you're looking for somebody to do the final commissioning and setup, that's really what the focus is. And there are some folks that are putting that into bid specs. If they want to make sure that it was last touched, so to speak, by a Shure associate.
Is that person also capable of doing end-user training or just commission?
They can do both. They can do the commissioning and the training, and it is a per-day fee. You're not going to see it in the price book. It's something that's unofficially done through our support folks.
So, Bill, I'll speak to that real quickly, and before we draw names for this, the process is do some pre-qualification to your customer, figure out the application, bring the application to us. First thing that we'd like to do is try to put together a list of materials and then find out what actual needs there are. And at the point of sale, there is as Michael said, a per day fee that we can do much of this remotely these days. A lot of times they don't necessarily need somebody there to hold their hand. They just want the assurance that the factory says, yeah, this is right. You're doing it right. What other questions you have? So it's kind of a work in progress. I just finished up a job where there was a city council, and it's an approximate fee of $1,500 to $2,000 per day for training. They probably don't need that. They probably just don't, depending on what their application is. So bring us your applications. Training online. If you haven't joined Shure Audio Institute, many of you may not know about it. Just go to shure.com and look up Shure Audio Institute. There's modules that are specific to many of the products that require the knowledge base of networking. So please, free, do it at your leisure. That's a good asset in the YouTube. So finally, everybody here did give us some business card and or name on a piece of paper. If your email address is on there, we will send you the deck that we've shown today, somewhat abridged. And then thank you for coming. I guess Todd, we're going to have he's got a magic methodology to how we're going to select. I've got two things here. One is I've been annoyingly recording all of your conversations that's going to go into the report. The other is a set of headphones. So again, thank you all very much for coming. Todd, take it away, brother.
Yet more fabulous acting. Thank you all for your valuable time.